This week is one of the biggest vibe shifts of the year, and that's because we're starting this week off with Saturn retrogressing back into Pisces. This is where Saturn has been since about March of 2023 up until the end of May of 2025. So whatever was going on between about January to May of 2025, we are revisiting that for the next 6 to 7 months. That begins this week. As well, we're going to be having Mercury ingress into Virgo and Mercury make a square to Uranus as two other highlights of this week. They're kind of minor, they're kind of helpful, a little bit sporadic. But then we're also going to be having Mars make a square to Jupiter, which is a little bit explosive, a little bit off topic in terms of what's going on in the energy anyway. It might be a little bit annoying and it might kind of blow some things up, and we'll talk about that throughout this horoscope. But we end the week with the lunar eclipse in Pisces, and we finally enter eclipse season. And eclipses are major endings and beginnings to things. And so this is kind of a gateway. This is kind of a door to open up to, do you want to make some radical changes in your life? Do you want to take some leaps of faith? If not, things are going to happen anyway. A lot of the times with eclipses, things are outside of your control that kind of change the course of the trajectory of what you're doing with your life. And that's what we have this week. So Saturn retrogressing into Pisces, and we end the week with the lunar eclipse in Pisces. This is a huge vibe shift. Let's go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to the astrology report, this time for September 1st through September 7th of 2025. My name is Cam White, and I like to tell you what is going on in the astrology and how to use it to your advantage. So also starting on Monday, on September 1st, this is going to be the first lecture of the Aspects series in my Learn Astrology membership over on my website. If you want to learn astrology in the easiest, the most affordable way, go ahead and sign up to become a member. We are starting the 10-week, I can't remember if it's 10 weeks or 10 lectures or 11 lectures about the aspects. And if you want to understand the aspects in your chart and not just what a square is or what a trine is, but the cycle that it holds in and of itself, so you have a deeper, more richer understanding of the aspects, not only for your chart, but every other chart that you look at, this is the course for you. As well, when you become a member, you're going to get access to the Zodiac course, which is, I think, 15 lectures on the Zodiac, which I pretty much make you a master or at least an expert in the Zodiac, as well as the planets course, where I can't remember the number of lectures that we have on there, but I go over every single planet and what it means and why it means what it means. Something I'm really passionate about with astrology is not just telling you telling you what things are so you can repeat it, but what I do is I explain to you why things mean what they mean in astrology, so that you understand it for what it is and that you can have your own interpretations of things because you understand the core principle of what it means in astrology. That's something I'm really passionate about. So you get the Zodiac course, the planets course, you'll be signed up for the aspects course, which we'll go over for the next 10 to 11 weeks. As well, you'll get the monthly rising sign horoscopes, as well as the monthly game plan, which is a member favorite, where I go over the transits of the month ahead and get you guys with the right mindset to go into the month and to lock in and to conquer it. So sign up for that if you are interested. The link is in the description. I will also put the link in the pinned comment as well. And let's get started talking about this week. All right, so let's just kind of get to the point. Saturn ingresses into Pisces like literally at 1 o'clock in the morning on Monday. And this is quite the vibe shift. What was going on, especially between April and May of 2025? When we look back to even March and April of 2025, where we had the Venus retrograde at the beginning of Aries at the last degrees of Pisces, and the Mercury retrograde there, and Saturn and Neptune were right over there. There was a lot of change going on in that area of your chart, wherever that rules in your chart. And as Saturn comes back into Pisces, we're kind of revisiting the lessons of what we learned during that time. Saturn is about discipline. Saturn is about maturity. Saturn is about time. And when it's in Aries, it's very there's not a lot of time. You have to do all of these things. It's very crunch. Saturn going into Pisces is a feminine sign. Pisces is a little bit more about the spiritual, the yin part of your spirituality. Sagittarius is much more yang. Sagittarius is I could believe anything is possible, and this is what my vision is. Pisces is okay, but how do we embody that feeling? As Saturn comes back into Pisces, essentially there's going to be a weight lifted from you. Saturn in Aries is a little bit of a lot of weight putting on you, a lot of weight on your shoulders, but also Saturn going back into Pisces is weight being gained, but it's a spiritual weight. It's a emotional weight. And I think as Saturn comes back into Pisces, it's not so much external, it's much more internal. It's not more, I've got all these things to do and there's all this pressure. It's this, who am I? Why do I feel this way? Who do I have to become? Do I need to be more stoic? Do I need to have more limitations? Do I need to have more restrictions on what I place my, emotions into? Do I need to have more self-control about my feelings? Do I need to be more specific about, how grounded I am and not being all over the place? Saturn going back into Pisces, I think, brings back this level of stoicism with our belief system. Because again, the two belief zodiac signs are Sagittarius and Pisces. And again, like I just said, Sagittarius is much more external. It's much more yang. Pisces is much more receptive, much more internal. And Saturn being there is kind of like, okay, what the stuff that's being thrown at you that you're receiving, what you have to have a gatekeeper. What is allowed to come in and what has to stay out. I think the other part about Saturn and Pisces too is the work, this is like, there's this saying, and I know it from Alex Hormozy, of course, I'm sure someone else has said it before though, but like the work works on you more than you work on it. And I think Saturn and Aries wasn't that, versus Saturn and Pisces is much more of the external work that you're doing is much more of a proxy for the internal work that's going on. What I like about Saturn and Pisces though too, is that Saturn is no longer debilitated. Saturn has fallen in Aries, where it makes things like time and structure and discipline much more difficult to attain, versus Saturn going back into Pisces. I mean, you can kind of argue it's peregrine. I don't really care about peregrine planets. That's a, dignity conversation for another day. But I do like the fact that it is no longer debilitated. So when it does come to, again, discipline, maturity, restrictions, limitations, it's much easier to navigate. In some ways that could be, for example, if Saturn's about restrictions and limitations and it's fallen in Aries, there could be less limitations, or the restrictions that are on there are easier to break. It's easier to break the rules. And as Saturn comes back into Pisces, maybe the rules get a little bit more enforced. But something I've thought a lot about is Saturn's about boundaries, and Pisces is very squishy and sponge-like, right? If you think of a sponge, it's technically like a boundary, but it's absorbent. And I think what's important is about what are you absorbing into from your environment, from other people, and how much of that is affecting you. I think this is going to be a really good time to kind of come back to whatever house Pisces rules in your birth chart. That is going to become a little bit more serious, a little bit more, and when I say serious too, there's been nothing going on in Pisces for a little while, just the North Node. So there's been this kind of like overall direction. You've been thinking about that stuff, but now it's time to kind of go like, okay, how do we make that more into reality? How do we make that more serious? How do I deal with more restrictions coming back to that area? That's the other part about Saturn and Pisces, is as it comes back into Pisces, whatever house it rules in your chart, you're going to have more restrictions, more discipline, more responsibilities in that area. And the part of your chart where Aries is at, the responsibilities kind of go away for a little while. This is also very important for how we get to the lunar eclipse in Pisces, which we'll be talking about at the end of this video when we actually get to that point. But there is just like, I think the big thing I want you guys to take away is there is an absolute vibe shift that starts this week. September, and I'm kind of planting some seeds with you guys right now. September is eclipse season. There's just going to be some major things that end and begin, whether you like it or you're not, whether it's your decision or it's out of your control. October, November, December, and January is like good astrology. We're energized. We're getting shit done. It's this month though that kind of like is the 52 card pickup. There's going to be some changes that just happen, and once those changes happen, then you can lock in for the rest of the year, even going into January. January's astrology is incredible. So keep that in mind. Like, let this month be a little bit chaotic. Let this month be a little bit of things outside of your control happening. Don't react to it. You don't have to freak out about things. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here with how I talk about eclipses, but just as we start the month, just know it's going to be different moving forward. So still on Monday, the moon is going to make a trine to Mercury. The moon is in Sagittarius, and it's going to make a trine to Mercury in Leo, and then it's going to square Saturn, and then the moon moves into Capricorn, and then it squares Neptune. So the thing about the moon in Sagittarius making that trine to Mercury is that there's this inspired feeling of like, yes, I can kind of go for whatever. Mercury's in Leo. The way that you're speaking to yourself mentally is very confident, but then the moon in Sagittarius squares Saturn and Pisces, which is like, okay, wherever you go, there you are. You can't run away from everything. Like, if you're going to go on this journey, you have to become a different person, because you will be different by the time you get there. There is no running away from things. And so the moon in Sag is very like freedom, adventure, fun. But as it squares Saturn and Pisces, it's like, well, why do you want to go? What are you running away from? Who do you have to become? Like, are you avoiding something? So there's this kind of like excited feeling that then turns into like, fuck, like, what am I doing? It's really weird. I think Monday's a really weird relapse to the past that you're not necessarily anticipating. So I would just say have a lot of awareness on what you're feeling on Monday. And what you're excited for and what you feel like is getting in your way, or what you feel like you have to be more in control of in order to get to go to the place that you're trying to go. But then the moon ingresses into Capricorn and it squares Neptune. So when the moon goes into Capricorn, you might be a little bit more stoic, you might be a little bit more reserved, you might be a little bit more serious. But with that serious attitude, after that square to Saturn, the moon goes into Capricorn and then squares Neptune. There's going to be this conflict of vision. Like I've been saying, Neptune is about idealism and vision, and it's in Aries, which is like idealizing the action and the war and the energy and the drive and the spark that we have. And as the moon goes into Capricorn, where emotionally it's a little bit more in detriment, so we have this a little bit more of a serious attitude, there's this conflict of like, well, what does my vision look like now? Now that Neptune is in Aries, but Saturn is in Pisces, what we're visioning, what we're idealizing is like the actions and the drive. But Saturn is like, well, where the work is, where the restrictions are on the internal. And so as you feel that restriction on the internal, and then the moon goes into Capricorn and squares Neptune and Aries, it's like, oh, well, that might mean the actions that I have to take to get there may not look the same way that I thought. And that might have a little bit of disruption to like the way that you romanticized things to be. Because Neptune is illusion, right? And as the moon goes into Capricorn and squares Neptune, there's this like the illusion is a little bit off. You get a little bit catfished, if that makes sense. But then we get into Tuesday, and on Tuesday, Mercury's going to ingress into Virgo. So that's our first highlight of the day. The moon, while it's in Capricorn, will trine the sun in Virgo. Great. But then Mercury makes a square to Uranus very late in the evening, pretty much at nighttime on Tuesday. So Mercury going into Virgo is great. Sometimes my issue with Mercury and Leo is it kind of stays there a little bit too long, where your brain is a little bit fried. Have you ever like been out in the sun for too long and you can't really think all of that well? That's what the Mercury in that very end degrees of Leo reminds me of. As Mercury goes into Virgo, it's really about, it's time to get organized. Mercury is about, again, communication, logistics, planning, operations. As it goes into Virgo, a lot of Virgo, and I talked about this in the September game plan. So if you're one of the members, you guys know what I'm talking about. But Virgo is about inventory. And I have, like, I talk about in the Zodiac lecture, I talk about in the planets lecture. Like, I'm very nerdy about specifically what Virgo is about. Without going in all of that, a lot of Mercury in Virgo is about like inventory. It's about listing. It's about organizing, like the actual accounting of physical items. And so as Mercury's going into Virgo, it's much more about black and white text. Gemini is more about communication, word of mouth through the grapevine. Mercury in Virgo is more specific. So as Mercury goes into Virgo, now we're starting to feel a little bit more organized. Not that just like Mercury and Leo is like connecting our thoughts to our willpower, connecting our thoughts to our ego, connecting our thoughts to our, what's the word I want that I'm looking for? Like our energy, like our confidence. Mercury in Virgo detaches from that and is much more about like, okay, well, what's the plan? What's the list? What do we need to do? So there's this really good organized feeling on Tuesday. And I do like that for Saturn going back into Pisces. There's a vibe shift. And then on Tuesday, it's like, all right, let's get organized. Let's get grounded. Let's start listing specific things out. We're still coming off of this new moon in Virgo. That's setting us up for the lunar eclipse in Pisces that we have at the end of this week. So we kind of already got in that mind frame with the sun in Virgo. Now it's time to actually lay down the law and actually start writing things out and actually get things in order. That's what's happening with Mercury going into Virgo. The moon, while it's in Capricorn, is going to be trining the sun, which is very stoic at checking boxes. Like there's something very productive about Tuesday of like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to do my work that's in front of me. Not too worried about anything else. I'm going to check this box, get this done, get this done, get this done. Tuesday is really good for just getting things done and not in an exciting way, not in this like new information way, but just absolutely doing what is required for you. I love that for Tuesday. But then late night, when Mercury's in Virgo, it's going to make a square to Uranus and Gemini. I'm really interested about this because when Mercury went into Leo, it sextiled Uranus and Gemini, right? So we got our first contact to Uranus and Gemini. But this is Mercury in Virgo squaring Uranus and Gemini. Mercury is both in domicile and exalted in Virgo. It does really, really well in Virgo, but it will be disrupted by Uranus. Uranus is all about disruptions. Uranus is all about chaos. Uranus is all about, unexpected events. And it's in the zodiac sign of Gemini, which is about information, which is about ideas, which is about technology. And so as Mercury goes into Virgo, it's kind of like, let's say you run a retail store and you're doing inventory. And as you're in the middle of inventory, your company changes your POS system and you have to all of a sudden learn a new operating system, operating software in order to do the organization that you have to do. that will be both a good and a bad thing. If you are expecting to get organized and just have everything, sail smoothly, I think you are kind of, you should be anticipating some sort of disruption. Now, the good thing though is Mercury in Virgo squaring Uranus and Gemini is very like, you know what? I just learned this new organization technique and I'm going to apply it. And when you apply that new organization technique, it will disrupt the order that you kind of plan on doing things with, but that's okay. Like Mercury squaring Uranus and Gemini is both like, I need to get this information clear, correct, but I might do it in a new way, or new information comes in that makes me change the way that I have to do it. So in my opinion, it's exciting, but it's really going to be dependent on your situation. And of course, it's like for fucking everything in astrology, it depends on your situation and where exactly it's at in your chart and everything else. But it's one of those things where the way to lean into it is to try new things, even if it kind of squares or it kind of disrupts the way that you thought it was going to be happening. Mercury squaring Uranus too will also be a disruption in communication. So if you have a certain plan or an itinerary or an agenda, expect some sort of an email or a communication that kind of throws off that plan, that kind of throws off that order, and you're going to have to be able to call audibles. Now, the good news is that this is Gemini and Virgo. They're adaptable signs. The mutable signs are all about adapting and changing. So don't be too afraid of like being able to just move with the times and not worry about being like, oh, well, I had it in my head, it was going to be this way. It's okay. You'll be able to adapt. So then we get to Wednesday. And as we get to Wednesday, so Tuesday's very awesome. Tuesday's like we're getting shit done. On Wednesday, though, the moon is going to be in Capricorn. It's going to square Mars and go opposite Jupiter almost simultaneously. And then the moon will be sextiling Saturn throughout the rest of the day. It will be applying to a sextile with Saturn, and the exact application of the moon aspect sextiling Saturn is like really late at night, early Thursday morning. Wednesday is pretty frustrating and overwhelming because Mars and Jupiter are within about a degree at this point. So they're really close. And I wonder how much the Mars-Jupiter square gets activated with this lunar transit. Sometimes it takes a lunar transit because the job of the moon is to like bring things from the heaven down to the earth. So like this might actually be the Mars-Jupiter square. We'll kind of see. But as the moon's in Capricorn, where it's a little bit more emotionally detached, it's a little bit more cut off from emotions, the moon in Capricorn is going to be squaring Mars in Libra. This just reminds me of like a DMV experience where you just have like a DMV person that could really care less about anybody or anything. But then you've got that one person who's like, what about me? And they're making all of this problem. And you're just kind of like, it's just jarring. Like you just don't even want to deal with it. The moon is about our emotions. It's squaring Mars in Libra, where maybe even the level of like lack of empathy or lack of care or lack of emotional investment disrupts the relationship or gets things out of balance. Like the moon's in detriment, Mars is in detriment. So the way that we're feeling is not really all that like in a good space to like be aware of it. And the way that we're dealing with conflict is more passive. It's not really confrontational. It's not really healthy. So that comes up. But then the moon immediately goes opposite Jupiter in Cancer, which is very overwhelmed. It's very like, man, I've got this person in my ear saying this, but there's this opportunity that I really want to take care of. I would just really expect Wednesday to kind of like be frustrating. It's very Ryan Gosling. Is it Ryan Gosling from Blade Runner 2049 or whatever, or Drive, where he's just like, he's got that, he's a Scorpio sun, Capricorn moon, where he's just kind of has this like stoic, like everything sucks face, but he just deals with it. Wednesday's like that. I don't know what else to tell you besides that. Now, the cool thing is after that moon transit, after the moon squares Mars and hits Jupiter, frustrating and overwhelmed, the moon will then be applying to Saturn for the rest of the evening. And the thing I wrote down was, I want you to find some quiet time to be studious. Like it's kind of like, you know, when the world is chaos and you have to like get into your mind palace, like to defrag from all of that, to kind of like not let that affect you. Saturn in Pisces is definitely monk mode. Saturn in Pisces is being able to not necessarily be distracted by the outside world and be more concerned about your response and your reaction to it internally. And so there's going to be kind of a flare up of problems for you that then throughout the rest of the day is really about going, okay, let me get to my Zen, let me chill out, let me find a way to just, you know, slowly process this. So Wednesday is kind of like a testing ground for like, all right, here's this problem. The moon's going to be in Capricorn and then sextile Saturn in Pisces. Let's remind you of what it means to have Saturn in Pisces transiting your chart. That brings us to Thursday. And on Thursday, very early in the morning, the moon will ingress into Aquarius. It will immediately sextile Neptune. Then it will conjoin Pluto. And then it will trine Uranus. But then our highlight for Thursday is Mars squaring Jupiter. So as the moon goes into Aquarius, look, it almost gets overwhelming to talk about every single time the moon goes into a fire air sign hitting all these outer planets. Because again, it's going to be happening once every couple days at this point. And the reason I find it overwhelming is because it's one of those things where I would argue that it's not as deep as maybe that you think, or at least not as to your awareness. And so I don't want to get too caught up in those, but the things that I wrote down was as the moon goes into Aquarius, it's like being connected, but disconnected. Like the moon transiting Aquarius is very online, where you are logged in and you're seeing what's going on in the world, but you're isolated in your room where you're not really connected to anything. That's like the moon in Aquarius vibe. So connected, but disconnected. And as the moon sextiles Neptune, conjoins Pluto, trines Uranus, is like somewhat overwhelmed. Like the moon in Aquarius sextiling Neptune in Aries might be like, okay, like that connecting and disconnecting is kind of helping that visioning part, but then it trines Uranus where you kind of get some new information, and that conjunction to Pluto then just kind of is like spiraling, overwhelmed. There's too much going on. So there's just going to be a lot going on, I think, on a lunar level on Thursday. But that brings us to Mars squaring Jupiter. This is a big blow up. A really good example of a Mars-Jupiter square was the Beirut explosion in 2020, where the firework, the Beirut explosion of 2020 is like 9/11, where you see a new angle of it. Like I see a new angle of it every single week, and I watch it every single time. That was a Mars-Jupiter square. It's hard to be like, oh, an explosion's going to happen, because it's not that, it's not like every Mars-Jupiter square there's an explosion. But what I would argue is Jupiter's in the superior position to this. As in Jupiter is in Cancer, but the thing I wrote down was unfair stealing. Mars squaring Jupiter reminds me of someone taking advantage of someone's good graces, where they, like let's say you have free fruit, like on your, where, my parents live, it's a little bit more rural in Southern California. A lot of people have these like little fruit stands outside, and it's like, take some fruit. It's not a big deal. And, they'll take enough for themselves, but then some people will exploit that and take everything. That's what Mars in Libra squaring Jupiter in Cancer reminds me of, is like someone exploiting someone's good graces, someone exploiting the system, unfair stealing, unfair advantages. And I wouldn't even say unfair advantages, but just kind of like taking an opportunity in somewhat of a bad faith. Now, Mars is fights and conflicts, and it's squaring Jupiter, which expands things, and it's through this square. So there might be this sort of blow up event that happens. Mars in Libra is really passive. And when you don't have good outlets for your aggression, for your energy, it kind of ends up seeping. It kind of ends up, being stagnant and kind of, festering until one day it does blow up into something. And that's what could happen here. So number one, it could be you that blows up on someone, but also two, it could be someone that blows up on you, or something kind of gets a little bit out of control. My advice is going to be like Mars in Libra, like Jupiter being in the superior position here is like Jupiter kind of overcomes the situation, where it is, I don't remember if I talked about this in the September Gameplan episode, but, or if it was on a weekly, but there's if you guys remember the Duck Dynasty show, one of the old guys, one of the duck guys, I don't remember which one, they all look the same, was getting robbed. And instead of like, cause that dude's he's gotta be carrying a gun. Instead of, pointing a gun at him and shooting him, he was like, hey, like, let me help you out. Like, don't steal from me. Let me just give you this money. And he ended up helping him out. And there was some sort of, moral of the story. He helped him out and everything went really well. But there's something about when someone is like you have to kind of kill them with kindness, or like show grace to your enemies, if that makes sense. And there's something about being like, okay, someone, again, it's rather than like someone robbing you. And I'm saying this more of metaphorically right now. Like, someone is taking advantage of you and you want to react and respond. What this is good for is like being the bigger and better person, but showing grace, showing empathy, and disarming the situation through that, if that makes sense. Now, you're probably saying, Cam, what the hell are you talking about with that? I know I'm going to struggle. I'm going to struggle with this. This is going to be super hard for me to deal with. But I'm just looking at the astrology. I just think this is like, what else is there to look at that with? Because it's not like, with Mars and Libra, this isn't a time to be like, let me just attack and let me just blah, you know what I mean? It's more so of like, this is why I talk about the courtroom situation, where the courtroom, it's like, if you're on trial for something and prosecution or some sort of witness is like absolutely saying the craziest things, you can't be like, what? You can't be reactive. You have to kind of like be chill about it, not let it get to you, and just know that that's just what they're doing, is they're going to paint you as the bad guy. And so as this kind of happens, I would really argue there's going to be a situation in which it could feel like an emergency blow up. But I think really the key here is showing a level of grace, humility, giving, and that might be very challenging, but I think that's where the good stuff is really going to come through. So do your best on Thursday. I just know I'm going to be struggling with it, and I'm going to be like the whole time like having to do that, but maybe that's what I need. So then we get to Friday, and on Friday the moon's still going to be in Aquarius, and it's going to be going opposite Venus. Super is it Friday night? I think the moon goes opposite Venus. It's going to be applying to Venus throughout the majority of the day, and then I think the opposition happens later at night. The moon goes opposite Venus while the moon's in Aquarius, and Venus is still in Leo. And then the moon, while it's in Aquarius, will make that trine to Mars in Libra, and then it goes void. I like Friday night, or I like Friday in general. It's very passionate Friday night, but the moon going opposite Venus and Leo, like the moon in Aquarius, is like, you're going to get some haters. You're going to get some people from the peanut gallery kind of criticizing this and criticizing that. Like, for example, the moon is how we're feeling. And again, there's like this connected and disconnected thing. Like, there's, it's so funny online how there's like actual spaces for people to hate on certain people. There's one channel I like called Baller Busters, and it just like makes fun of all of the fake, guru people. And it's funny every now and then, but sometimes it kind of gets taken to an extreme. And as the moon is in Aquarius going opposite Venus and Leo, there is this kind of like, maybe someone's doing something that is very public or very grandiose, and you might have a little bit of spite. You might have a little bit of hate about that, and you might be opposing that, or it might be you that's wanting to put yourself out there, and there's kind of people that are rejecting that. It depends on what side of the fence you find yourself on in this situation, but just that dynamic is going to be very present. Now, the moon, as it leaves that opposition to Venus, will be trining Mars, and there is something about the moon in Aquarius trining Mars in Libra is, when it comes to like haters, and I hate saying that word, but when it comes to like haters or people that are like criticizing you, they find so much power in that because they don't really do the confrontational thing. And there is something fun about collective, like, when you ever met someone that like also dislikes the same thing that everyone else likes, but you dislike it and you get to share with that. That's what the moon in Aquarius trining Mars in Libra reminds me of. It's just kind of like, oh my God, you hate that too. And like, there's like a connection off of that. Maybe I'm just a hater, but I'm working on it. Anyway, the moon, while it's in Aquarius, trines Mars in Libra, is at least connecting and relating to other people. But the reason I bring up the hate part of it is like, it's like Mars in Libra. Like there's some sort of like a problem that creates the connection. And then the moon goes void. So there's like this fun on the hating thing, or fun in connecting with other people based off that shared interest. And then really nothing kind of happens throughout Friday night. But that brings us to Saturday, where on Saturday, I think it's later on in the day, the moon ingresses into Pisces. This is us officially beginning the eclipse window. The moon will go into Pisces, and it's going to be making a square to Uranus almost immediately. And then the moon will be going opposite Mercury in Virgo. During this whole time on Saturday, it is building up to the full eclipse. But the eclipse window really does start on Saturday, right as the moon ingresses into Pisces. So as the moon ingresses into Pisces and we start the eclipse window, it squares Uranus. There's kind of this, like, the eclipse begins with a disruption. Uranus in Gemini is, again, disruption, information, chaos with, curiosity and new stuff. And the moon going into Pisces, where it's a little bit more sensitive, it's a little bit more like, again, imagine you're going into a deprivation tank or something like that, and you want to relax, and then all of a sudden, like, an earthquake happens. You're going to be like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, it's going to throw you off your game. That's what that reminds me of. So there's some sort of like getting into the zone of the eclipse where things are happening, but it's immediately met with a disruption. So Saturday, just kind of like be on the lookout for that. Something that you have to remember with astrology is that it's not necessarily about avoiding or changing. It's about awareness so that you're not all of that like thrown off by it. Like, for example, when you're driving down the road and you see someone do something stupid, sure, you might have like a comment about it, but is it that surprising? No, bunch of idiots on the road. Like, you're kind of anticipating that to a level. It's the same thing with astrology. So after the moon goes into Pisces, it squares Uranus, there's this disruption. And the way I would look at that is Uranus and Gemini is just like curious. It wants to change things. And the moon goes into Pisces. And the one thing too about Uranus and Gemini is, you're going to start seeing people change their relationship to online spaces. So maybe this is like even like you getting disgusted with your phone and throwing it and being like, I need to go out into the woods or something like that, or go into a lake or a river. The moon then goes opposite Mercury. And the theme that I wrote down for the September game plan is what this month is about is the known versus the unknown. And I think this is a really difficult dynamic. And we're going to be experiencing this dynamic over the next few weeks. It's not a one day you don't know things and the next day you do. It is this constant ebb and flow of known information versus unknown information. And now that you know some things, what becomes unknown? And now that you understand what is unknown, well, what do you know? And it's going to kind of be frustrating isn't really the best word. I would say challenging mentally. And I think the best way to go about this eclipse series over the next 2 weeks is like letting information come to you and being open to what maybe you don't know, but being open to not having to know it. And I think that's going to be really hard. I think it's going to be really hard because, like I said in the beginning of the year, the South Node's in Virgo. So while Mercury's in Virgo, the Sun's in Virgo, we want to have this organization. But as we're getting towards the South Node stuff, we're getting all this stuff organized so we know what to eliminate. This isn't about getting organized so we know what to add. This is about getting organized so we know what to eliminate and we know what to get rid of. Because as the North Node's in Pisces, you have to make room for more. God will take things and people out of your life so that you have room for more. And right now, with the lunar eclipse in Pisces, you're about to be introduced into what is going to be more for you. There is more on your way. And this lunar eclipse, so I mean, like the way I would also look at this too, is what an eclipse is where the light is supposed to be shining, but it gets cut off. So a full moon is an illumination where things aren't typically being illuminated. So that would be Pisces. And so we're supposed to be seeing the unseen here, but the moon goes red. It's a lunar eclipse. It goes dark. It's obfuscated in some sort of sense. So there's this level of like, I want to grow more. I want to make room for more in my life. And where you're expecting to see some of that, you're going to see that be obfuscated. There is something coming into your life that you weren't actually anticipating or that you weren't actually seeing. And that's going to confuse you because the thing that you end up knowing about makes more things unknown. And it's like, this is why it's going to be a really weird month. It's going to be a weird month. It's going to be weird and magical. And I don't use the word magical often or lightly. And so this all happens. And let me get to this one part. The moon, as it goes into Pisces, right? Squares Uranus, there's a disruption. The moon goes opposite Mercury, where the moon in Pisces is it's trying to be open and sensitive, but it's opposing Mercury in Virgo, which is like, here's the best dynamic to explain the moon in Pisces opposite Mercury in Virgo. Any one of you, like the majority of your women, when you try to explain a guy like astrology or mysticism, you're being the moon in Pisces and him being like, you believe in that shit? It's not fucking real. It's very Mercury in Virgo. Like, it's like, okay, you're not ready for, an actual adult conversation about things because you're too focused on, what sources you're reading and bullshit like that. So that's the dynamic, but you're going to be seeing that not only like within your own life, of course, also too what axis of houses Virgo and Pisces rules over, but the moon's in Pisces where you're trying to, it's gaining light, right? Or I should say gaining light with a big asterisk, opposite Mercury in Virgo. What you're trying to be open, receptive to, and sponge-like to is going to go opposite about what you think you know, what you think you should be planning for. But that brings us into Sunday. The thing I wrote down for Sunday, we have the lunar eclipse in Pisces. Then the moon will be making a trine to Jupiter and Uranus stations retrograde. Now, okay, something I forgot to write down was Uranus stations retrograde on Saturday, but whatever. Saturday, Sunday, it's the same thing. We're going to get to that. But as the lunar eclipse in Pisces happens, the thing I wrote down was you just have to let it happen. What I mean by that is there's going to be this internal increase for more. The moon will literally get eclipsed and then immediately trine Jupiter. This is hey, more is coming for you in just a moment. There is more happening in your life that is coming for you. It's literally on the way. This is your email saying that Amazon has shipped the package. The issue is after this, you're going to realize I don't have any room for this package. And that's as we get off of this lunar eclipse in Pisces and the moon starts going towards the south node and we get to the solar eclipse in Virgo, you have to start making room for the more. And so this lunar eclipse in Pisces, it's not going to be like here's this exact thing. It's like, for example, coming back to the Amazon package analogy, you're going to get an email saying a package is on its way. You don't know what that package is. You don't know how big it is. You don't know how many things are in it, but something is coming in. That is essentially what this lunar eclipse in Pisces is. Like, something becomes known, you got something on the way, but it's unknown what it is. It's going to really fuck with you. I'm part of me isn't excited, but part of me is excited because it's like, I don't know, astrology is just fun. Like, this is like fun in my opinion. Like, oh, la la la. Who knows what's gonna happen? So again, you really want to look at the house axes that Virgo and Pisces rules for you. But as that happens, the moon trines Jupiter. There is something on its way, and the thing is too, it's going to be obfuscated. You're not going to really understand it. You're going to think you know what it is, but you're not going to know what it is. And that's how we end the week. Well, we also have Uranus stationing retrograde, which is a highlight. And the thing is with Uranus going retrograde is Uranus moving forward is like chaos, change, disruption, new things happening to you, like, or you're pursuing new things. Uranus going retrograde is like, okay, now that I understand the new lay of the land, how do I operate within this new system? How do I re-navigate all of this? Like, in terms of like even technological growth as Uranus is moving forward, it's like we're moving forward versus Uranus and Gemini is like, we have to defrag the bugs in the software and we have to clean some things up before we can keep introducing new things. So there is somewhat of a slowdown when it comes to just kind of like, this is changing, that is changing. But Sunday's very weird. And again, like, you know, we all know the Lionsgate portal thing is just essentially made up. I think if there was anything that can be given the portal context, it would be eclipses. But the thing I want you to remember too, and this is probably the most important, I probably should have said this a little bit more at the beginning, is eclipses will feel like emergency events. And you do not have to react to them. What eclipses are, hey, here's this thing. You can choose into this thing and change your life. Or you cannot choose into this thing. It's up to you. But it's going to feel like you have to take action on it immediately. It's going to feel like an emergency event. And I can't tell you, I mean, like last year on the lunar eclipse in Pisces in my 4th house, long story short, there was a leak in the restaurant underneath me. It was leaking water. I was told by like 7 different people they were going to have to completely rip up all of the floorboards. I would have to move out of my house for like 2 months. I'm like looking for places. I'm doing all this. Like it was literally like an emergency event. And I literally went, wait, Cameron, this is a fucking eclipse. Chill out, make a decision later. You don't have to act on it. And nothing happened. But it was like this emergency event got thrown up in my face and I didn't respond to it. Like, I mean, like I'm someone with a lot of willpower. Like I was ready to move and get things and have things handled, but nothing happened. So I really want to emphasize, like, there's going to be things that will be introduced to you. You do not have to react. You don't have to respond. You do not have to, it's not every emergency situation is your emergency. That's the thing to remember. So keep that in mind. And as we get into next week, we're in that weird eclipse window where everything's a little bit funky. And next week we have the sun conjoining the south node, Mercury conjoining the south node, and the Mercury cazimi. Next week is where this is like Sunday's like the introduction of the unknown. Next week is where we go, well, if we don't know this, then we can get rid of this info, this info, this info. And then we can start understanding what we do know, what we do need to get organized, what we do need to get clear on. So it's a very weird window at this time. Like, for example, it reminds me of Fermi's paradox. I think that's totally incorrect. But the paradox that's like, you know, we should know, oh gosh, I can't even remember what it is. Parker, put something up right here where it's like, we should know by like how big the universe is, there should be life. But if we know that if with how big the universe is and there should be life, why haven't we found it yet? It's something like that. Like that's like a very Virgo Pisces situation there. So that's what this week is, guys. I think this is an incredible vibe shift into September. September is a very pivotal month and it helps us get locked into the rest of the year. So just let this month be this month. There's going to be a lot of knowns and there's going to be a lot of unknowns, and you do not have to solve every equation in order to have some progress. So I'm going to leave you guys off with that. I love and appreciate you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.